Greetings, mortals market shoppers. How are we today? Finding some pretty things? Some future heirlooms for our dark babies to cherish? While I hope you enjoy perusing the deathly delights we've assembled here for you today, you know I can't resist perusing the dark side of the market. To market, to buy a dead man. In 2011, an international ring of mummy smugglers was busted in New York attempting to import mummy paraphernalia via such exotic locales as Dubai and Michigan. This was actually a pretty big deal. This was the first time that they dismantled this kind of black market network in the US. Confiscated items included, quote, a Greco-Roman style Egyptian sarcophagus, a nesting set of 3 Egyptian sarcophagi, a set of Egyptian funerary boats, and Egyptian limestone figures, a collection with an estimated market value of $2.5 million. Mummy smuggling seems like a thing of the past, the domain of the tweed-wearing, pit helmet-sporting, tea-sipping Englishman named Lord Reginald, but alas, mummy smuggling is alive and well in the 21st century. Mummy-related objects, or even mummy remains, are excavated and illegally sold around the world. The Egyptian desert is just so big, and poverty is just so high in certain mummy hotspots, that locals are willing to do the dig, so to speak, for the big bucks foreigners are shelling out. These days, it seems collectors are more interested in the sarcophagi rather than what's inside the sarcophagi. But that hasn't always been the case. You know what the Victorians loved. Arsenic! Well, yes, they loved arsenic, but they also loved mummies. Mummies as medicine, mummies as paint, mummies as the centerpiece to Lord Reginald's midsummer soiree. As early as the 16th century and all the way into the early 20th century, mummy vendors couldn't sell mummies fast enough to European enthusiasts. People believed ground-up mummy could cure anything from head ailments to internal bleeding, and a paint color known as mumia, or mummy brown, was the color of the moment for a while. Mummy brown is kittens! But if you weren't someone bleeding internally, or an artist working on your next big brown masterpiece, perhaps mummy unwrapping was more to your taste? Either at a public ticketed event, or at some well-to-do aristocrat's secret dinner party, a mummy would be ceremoniously unwrapped, while a rapt audience looked on. The hope was that the mummy had been buried with jewels, amulets, curiosities, and that the guests would go away with a sparkly souvenir. If you were lucky, and Thomas Mummy Pettigrew was doing the unwrapping, he's the guy who made mummy unwrappings like a thing, and yes, his nickname was actually Mummy, you might be treated to a post-unwrapping autopsy. But where did all these mummies come from? When mummy mania hit a fever pitch and wealthy Europeans were clamoring to buy a piece of antiquity, burial chambers and mummy pits, mass graves filled with mummies of unknown origin, were opened up to market. An intrepid buyer could personally venture into one of these chambers or to a pit to pick out their own burial object or entire mummy, or they could pay a vendor to excavate the location for them. Either way, by the early 20th century, the Egyptian mummy market had so ransacked the dead that the pits were all but empty, and dealers resorted to fake mummies. All those fake mummies sounded the death knell for mummy market mania. Mummies are all well and good, but sometimes an old-timey European needed something slightly less ancient to cure what ailed them. If that was the case, look no further than blood or fat. The fresher, the better. In the 16th and 17th centuries, apothecaries would make compounds from blood or fat to sell to the masses. Blood was supposed to stop anything from head ailments to internal bleeding, though it could be quite expensive for the discerning consumer. But if there was an execution in town, whew, you're in luck. In Germanic countries, people would stand at the foot of the executioner and pay a small fee for a cup of fresh, hot, criminal blood. Fingers crossed that the criminal was a virile young man or a virgin woman. That was the good stuff. Of course, the executioner didn't just kill people and dole out blood. He would also deliver human fat to the apothecary so they could in turn sell it to people to make pain-killing plasters, like the one administered to Oliver Cromwell, made of opium, hemlock, and you guessed it, human fat. And for ease of consumption, one 17th century Franciscan apothecary concocted a recipe for blood marmalade. Keeps well and keeps you well. So remember, Deathlings, you will die, but your body may carry on to market for the right price. Happy shopping!
Really big sale.